I recorded a video earlier that explained I'm a Northern Illinois University student, and the death/homicide of Toni Keller has affected me deeply. It was a video filled with thanks and thoughtfulness and reflection and emotion. And this is a video that's going to be filled with emotion too, though it's a very different one. Now, I'm pissed. I'm angry. I'm sick and tired and fed up. I made the mistake of looking into media reports of Toni's disappearance, and I stumbled across the Huffington Post. I don't care about the Huffington Post. Yes, it's liberally biased. Don't really care. Don't pay that much attention to it anyway. However, what has me really unhappy was that the Huffington Post decided in their article about Toni's disappearance to, quote, not the Daily Chronicle, which is DeKalb's local paper, but Northern Illinois' paper, which happens to be called the Northern Star, an institution that can barely be called an institution, a paper that I consider to be barely good enough to line my garbage can. And I've been told it's a great paper for a university paper, but apparently I have really high standards. At some point in the very near future, and it's possible right after I record this, I will read and record an open letter to the Illinois legislature they posted last year, as well as my response, and maybe you'll get a better idea why I don't consider anything the Northern Star has to say to be worthwhile. Specifically, what has me irritated is not that the Huffington Post chose to quote the Northern Star, it's what they chose to quote from it, and the fact that the Northern Star published it at all. What happened with Toni is a tragedy. It is one that has affected the entire NIU community as well as people the world over. However, it is irresponsible reporting by the media that makes it worse. The Northern Star apparently put in an editorial today that the community, whether it be NIU or DeKalb, I'm not really sure, they don't bother to specify, that, quote, the community is hysterical. I'm a part of this community, and I've never been hysterical. I've been to class yesterday, today, all of last week, and I haven't seen a single person who was hysterical. I've seen people upset, angry, sad, worried, afraid. I've been all of those things, but I have not seen a single person who I could qualify as being hysterical. Really? The fact that the Huffington Post chose to quote that frosts my cookies. Because it's that kind of inflammatory rhetoric that just makes the entire situation worse. Apparently, media reports have been saying that NIU was on lockdown. News organizations were saying before Tuesday's press conference, in which the death investigation was officially reclassified, that it was a homicide investigation, as early as Monday morning. Now, yes, it has ultimately proved that that report was inaccurate, yet premature. To make that assumption and report that it was a homicide days before there was any evidence released to say that and support that, screw you. It is that kind of irresponsible reporting that only makes that situation worse for those of us who are trying to deal with it. Let's be honest. What's the point of trying to sensationalize the story? So that you'll get more web clicks and more attention and more people will turn to your coverage versus somebody else's? Sensationalism sells. Well, guess what? Toni's disappearance is sensational enough in and of itself, and so was she. She was important enough to so many people that you shouldn't need to sensationalize her disappearance so more people will pay attention. It's an insult to those of us who cared about her whether we knew her or not, and it's an insult to her memory. The fact that she was a pretty little white girl who went missing, whose body was burned to such a degree that it couldn't even be stated it was human for 9 days, that's kind of sensational. To sit there and use rhetoric like hysterical. Seriously? This is a situation that doesn't need to be made any more sensationalized. And to do so is to state that Toni's life and disappearance and the circumstances of both were not worthy enough of being news without being edited and improved. And that sucks. So I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate the Northern Star's statement that the community is hysterical because we're not being given answers. Because it implies that A, we're all hysterical, screw you, not hysterical. But secondly, it implies that the NIU Police Department and the DeKalb County Major Case Squad is keeping answers from us. Seriously? Yes, I understand that it's cool for young people to question the police and to not trust the po-po. But it's in their best interest to make sure that we're safe. And the best way to make us safe is to give us the answers to the questions we need so we can protect ourselves. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm pissed. Yes, I'm scared. And yes, I want answers too. But I do not think that the answers are being withheld from me by the police department or NIU or anybody else, regardless of what some students' parents think, apparently. Really? If you cannot trust the police department or the university to ever be looking out for your children, don't send them here. Don't send them anywhere. I came to NIU after the shooting because I trusted the university, and I trusted the university's police department, and I have seen nothing in the past 3 years to make me question that. I believe that they say it took them 8 days to identify the body as human. Makes perfect sense to me, and it is even the more tragic that I believe that that's the case. I don't think they were keeping it from me because really, what would the purpose be? To imply that only creates a sense that we can't trust the police department and there's no way that we can be safe. And how does that make the community be safer? It only heightens the tragedy. Some people are claiming that there's a serial killer out there. Seriously? What evidence do you have that there's a serial killer? Also, do you have any idea the statistical likelihood that a murder, any murder, is the cause of a serial killer? Shut up. Because speculation like that and rhetoric like that, while understandable because people are scared, is only going to create more fear. It is only going to make it harder for people to deal with this situation and harder for her family to cope. Because even though they know that 99% likelihood that their daughter was killed by a serial killer, or rather 99% likelihood that she wasn't, somebody saying it, somebody voicing that, gives rise to that little voice of doubt in the back of their head, and a lot of times that voice never goes away. So out of respect for the family, I'm not voicing any baseless speculation because that's all that it is, baseless speculation. I wish members of the community, whatever community it might be, and the media would stop using inflammatory sensationalist rhetoric and speculating without any evidence to back it up. Because it just makes the tragedy worse. Also, on a related note, I personally don't appreciate places like the Huffington Post, and I'm sure others, referencing the NIU shooting as some sort of background information and context for what Northern Illinois is. To me, whether this is fair or not, I see a very big difference between members of the NIU community like myself who draw on that shooting and explain that it's just the first in a long line of tragedies since then that make it hard for the NIU community to cope with the current one. Because we're still trying to heal from what happened 3 years ago. And so this just kind of makes it even more difficult for us to deal with the tragedy that happened with Toni. However, none of the media stories that I've seen referenced the shooting in that way. They referenced it as some sort of background information. But it's not. It's not just background information for the university, and the university and its community is so much more than just a place that experienced the fourth deadliest university shooting in the United States. That's not all the university is known for. And to be honest, I can't speak for the entire community, but I personally don't appreciate that being brought up in all of the national mainstream coverage of this particular disappearance. Because first of all, Toni's disappearance has nothing to do with that tragedy, and those individuals and those victims deserve to be remembered in their own right, as a completely separate event, with its own causes and its own answers. But secondly, because Toni deserves better. She was a freshman here this semester. She had nothing to do with NIU back then, and she deserves to be remembered, and her tragedy remembered and covered, not because it happened at a place where a shooting happened 3 years ago, but because it was worthy of being covered in and of itself. Covering the NIU shooting in conjunction with Toni's disappearance, to me, is coming off as just another way to sensationalize the story and to make it more interesting to the people who read it, more worthy of being covered, if you will. And I happen to find that a little insulting, because I happen to think that Toni's life, death, and the facts of both were interesting and are interesting enough in and of themselves. They shouldn't need to be sensationalized with background information about Northern Illinois University's shooting or past tragedies. And it shouldn't have to be sensationalized with words like hysterical. It's interesting and newsworthy in and of itself, as tragic as this situation is. It is the tragedy of what's actually happened that makes it worthy of being covered, not what the media can turn it into. If you can't cover this event responsibly, then don't cover it at all. Get the hell off my campus, stay the hell away from my vigils, and leave the reporting of this tragedy to the people and the organizations and the media outlets who can do so by giving the tragic facts as they exist, not the facts that they can turn them into. Because to do anything else just isn't fair to me, to NIU, or to Toni. And let's be honest, today, tonight, right now, isn't the coverage of her disappearance and death supposed to be about her?